back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video, and once again we are taking a look at scenarios from other games and how to port them over to Age of Sigmar. And in this one in particular, I wanted to talk about one of the scenarios from the original Lord of the Rings rulebook that I intend to port over very soon into Age of Sigmar. I think this would be a pretty cool scenario to, especially with how I'm imagining adapting it, or certainly in other ways that you could adapt it, to be part of like a linking scenario for campaigns, right? And so I just wanted to discuss it. And this one is the scenario from the original rulebook, Amon Hen, which you're probably familiar with if you've seen the movies or read the books. It is the scene whenever Boromir of the Fellowship lays down his life to try to save the two hobbits, Merry and Pippin, and whenever the Fellowship is kind of breaking apart initially, and Frodo and Sam end up leaving. And this is, of course, after Gandalf has fallen in the fight with the Balrog in Moria at the very end of the Fellowship of the Ring movie. But anyways, in this particular one, I'm not going to really bother with the participants in the points match. The participants are just, you know, the Fellowship minus Gandalf and Evil is just a bunch of Uruk-hai. The layout is relatively unimportant. Again, the layout for this particular one is that, you know, is in such a way to try to recreate the scenes from the movie. The starting positions, again, are relatively unimportant because, you know, they are designed for the Lord of the Rings game, in which, if you watch my previous video, where I began talking about kind of generic scenarios from the army books from the Lord of the Rings game, how the Lord of the Rings game is a slower paced game in terms of movement. You have flat movement rates. You don't really affect those. In the latest edition of the game, there were ways to boost your movement slightly. Like heroes could, you know, heroes could expend might, which they had a limited supply of, to, you know, boost your movement by 3 inches, things like that, but for the turn. But that was it. There wasn't really a whole lot of ways. There wasn't, you know, the run option. There wasn't the charge in the charge phase. You charged in the movement phase. All of your movement happened at once. So it's a much slower paced game, so the starting positions are not really relevant for Age of Sigmar. But the objectives is what is, and special rules are what are really interesting, or could be interesting, in an Age of Sigmar game. The objectives are: the good side must try to escape from the short side of the map. It's played on a standard 72 inch by 48 inch, so 6 by 4 table. And basically, you know, they have to try to get as many of their heroes off the far table edge, and Evil is trying to capture capture Frodo in this, and as many others as they can. And the special rules are that whenever Evil in this, you know, because you have the good and evil forces in Lord of the Rings, are in close combat, they can opt to not slay a model whenever they would kill it, and instead it's just knocked out, and they need 2 guys to basically carry the model forward and try to get it off, you know, their own table edge. And you know, an allied unit that comes up if the model that is unconscious is on the ground, there's not any enemy models kind of holding it, can then attempt to revive it back at that last wound. And so I thought that would be kind of a cool adaptation for Age of Sigmar if you had a scenario like I'm hoping to run pretty soon, where you would have the 2 factions, and you would have one faction's sole purpose was to protect their leader, or maybe a couple models, probably 2 or 3 would work out best, different heroes, and the other side's objectives were to capture them. And obviously, you know, in kind of the narrative spirit of the game, it would probably be best if you were playing kind of mid-tier heroes to lower tier. So no Nagash, no Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, like I just ran in my previous one. You know, stuff like that. Maybe the biggest and baddest of heroes that you would want to bring is Vlad level, and even that might be a bit high. And probably Foot sloggers would be the best choice, just because it would make the most sense. As like, if you basically were to say that a mounted model, the rider was knocked out, and then to kind of be dragging that model around with the mount, still attached, would be kind of weird from a visual perspective. But anyways, you could still make it work, right? You could just say the mount ran off temporarily or whatever, and whenever they're freed, they kind of resummon their mount to them, something along those lines. But anyways, with the objective being that the attacking side is trying to get those guys off of their table edge, which you can determine whatever it is, and the defending side is trying to, either hold off for a certain amount of time or get their commanders off, the far table edge. So, if I take, for example, the little map here for the scenario, because I just think that having a physical representation makes it a lot easier to explain. As you can hopefully see here, that in this scenario, basically good started scattered, but primarily down here, and they were trying to get off of this top edge. And now evil was trying to get them off of this far side, and then this side, of course, over here is basically impassable. So if you took the same concept and you said, well, maybe most of the defending force sets up down here near the bottom, and they have to get off the top side, which is where the attacker comes into play, and the attacker has to get them and get them off of this side edge or something like that. That could make for a very interesting game, I think. Or maybe they have to grab them and take them back off their own table edge if you are playing more of like a turn-based game where it's like, we're playing after 7 turns we roll, and on a 6 the game ends because reinforcements have arrived. And each turn after that it's successively 1 easier to end the game. With the lowest ever being a 2. It's like never an automatic end. And that could be a pretty interesting scenario, I think, and especially in light of like a larger campaign. So hopefully I'll get to test that out pretty soon. I'd like to run that, kind of continuing in the campaign that I just started and I put up my first battle report for. But anyways, that's that. I hope that, number one, that scenario might be appealing to you. If not, at least, can help kind of get the creative juices stirring. But that's going to be it for this video. Until next time, this is James. Happy gaming.